Kung Fu Dunk begins by showing an abandoned baby in a field near a basketball court. The baby was crying so loudly that it was heard by a man dressed in shabby clothes like a tramp. Curious, the man approached the source of the sound and found the baby lying on a pile of old tires, with a letter nearby. He felt sorry for the baby but realized he couldn't afford to raise him. Therefore, he took the poor baby to a kung fu school, leaving the baby to his friend, a master at the school. Day after day passed. Now the baby, named Fang Shijie, has grown into a boy who is obedient to his teacher. But unfortunately, one night, Fang witnessed his master die after casting a move that could change the universe's conditions. So, Fang had to grow up without his teacher. When he got older, he felt his heart skip a beat every time he saw and heard the bounce of a basketball. Even so, the atmosphere at the Kung Fu school changed somewhat after the teacher who raised Fang passed away. The once submissive kid has become rebellious, especially towards the headmaster Wang Biyao, who always makes Fang his punching bag. Funnily enough, Fang always pretended to be in pain whenever Wang demonstrated the power of his fists in front of the students. In fact, Fang was secretly wearing an iron vest, so he didn't feel any pain no matter how hard Wang tried to punch him. But Fang's trick was eventually uncovered, so he had to spend a night on the streets without getting dinner. In the evening, while taking a walk in the park, Fang played with several cans of drinks by throwing and kicking them one by one with his kung fu moves right into the trash can. Without realizing it, an old man sitting not far from him witnessed what he was doing. The man, whose name was Zhen Li, then approached Fang and tried to follow his movements. But unfortunately, he consistently failed to put the can in the trash. Frustrated, Zhen then sat beside Fang, and the two of them began to get acquainted, although their conversation was soon interrupted by the sound of Fang's stomach growling. Realizing that Fang was starving, Zhen decided to give him a challenge, in which Fang had to toss a coin from a significant distance into his mouth. If Fang succeeds, Zhen promises to reward him with a portion of food. As expected, Fang managed to get the coin into Zhen's mouth, even down his throat. With this, Zhen had to keep his promise. And so, he took Fang to a French restaurant, where the price of the food got Fang shocked. Zhen actually couldn't afford the food, especially if he had to treat Fang. But Zhen had a trick to get them both to enjoy French food for free by relying on his daughter, who worked as a waitress there. Zhen's daughter already knew the purpose of her father's arrival, indicating that he was used to coming to the restaurant to ask for food. She then served Zhen and Fang 2 servings of leftovers, complete with 2 glasses of wine. Then, while offering a toast, Zhen conveyed the grand plan he would do with Fang, leaving him confused. After dinner, Zhen takes Fang to a nightclub for a darts bet with the club's owner, Ahui. The result was predictable. Ahui's men lost badly because Fang's throws were always on target. Zhen, who was happy after getting a lot of money from the bet, certainly didn't forget to share the winning money with Fang. But apparently, Ahui didn't want to admit defeat, especially since he had already lost a lot of money. And so, he ordered his team to beat up Zhen. Luckily, Fang is good at kung fu. He beat Ahui's men one by one with his moves, and in no time, managed to defeat them. The next day, Ahui and his staff came to the kung fu school where Fang lived. But while talking to the principal of Wang's school, a bald man with glasses who came with Ahui, asked Wang to give up the school's leadership. Of course, at first, Wang refused, but he immediately changed his mind after being bribed by a chest of gold bars. Not long after, Wang gathered his students in the field and asked who the student that caused trouble at Ahui's nightclub was. He asked the perpetrator to come forward and admit his actions had stained the school's reputation. A student suddenly stood up, not to confess but to point at Fang, calling him the cause of chaos in the nightclub. Turned out that Fang was beaten by several of Ahui's men in the middle of the field while many people, including the teachers, watched. As if that wasn't enough, Wang kicked him out of school on the grounds of defamation. Fang, who felt he was being mistreated, finally took off his uniform and left the school, making the teachers saddened by his departure. In the evening, Fang goes to the park to meet Zhen and says he wants revenge on Ahui. Zhen tries to calm Fang down by giving him a ball to throw in the trash can at the end of the park. And Fang, again, did it brilliantly. Seeing Fang's potential, Zhen took him to meet Zhao, a dean at First University. He presented his plan to Zhao to include Fang on the First University basketball team. Not only that, Zhen cleverly affixed his presentation with a sad story about the life of an orphan Fang to make it a news headline. Zhen's efforts were successful. The next day, Zhen and First University representatives introduced Fang at a press conference, where he later met the girl he idolized. This is where he learns that the girl, Lily, is part of his basketball team. During the interview, Lily asked Fang to follow the campus tradition where new members must beat the team captain at least by 1 point. Without wasting time, Lily called the team captain, who was none other than her brother, Ting Wei. Lily's call went unanswered, but she could hear her brother's ringing tone in the room. Upon approaching the sound source, she found Ting drunk behind the press conference stage. Regardless, the duel between Fang and Ting still started. Watched by the audience, Ting managed to score with a beautiful dunk. But not long after, Fang retaliated with his long-range throw. The next day, Fang brings the newspaper and angrily shows it to Jen. Naturally, he was angry because the newspaper had a story about him, where Fang was called an orphan and had been bullied by the basketball team captain. But instead of getting angry, Jen tried to calm him down, saying that it was sensational news that could make Fang famous. At noon after practice, Fang went to Ting to apologize. And then, the two of them chatted, and Ting gave Fang advice on the game of basketball, where the player who controlled the rebound could rule the game. Fang heeded the advice, although later, he demonstrated his throwing skills, which never missed the mark. In the next training session, Fang finally joined Ting's team and immediately showed his skill, making Ting believe that he had found the ultimate weapon for the team. But then came Xiyu Lan, a player who had been away for a long time due to an injury. Xiyu's arrival was warmly welcomed by Lily, who immediately introduced him to Fang. But somehow, Xiyu was cold towards Fang. A few days later, the first university basketball team's first game started. Although in that match, Fang sat on the bench from the start of the game until the end. He only entered the game after Jen tried to persuade Ting. But because he was still an amateur, Fang made a few mistakes and almost messed up his team. Fortunately, Fang could make the doubters go silent in the final seconds with a long-range throw right on target. After the match, Fang practiced more and more diligently. Even in between rehearsals, he asked Ting to teach him a slam dunk, especially before this Ting had promised. But somehow, Ting felt that Fang wasn't ready. Fang was impatient and trained alone at night without Ting's help. He jumped into the ring to do a slam dunk with his kung fu moves. But his jump was too high that he hit a lamp and fell. The scene then switches to the second match of the first university basketball team, where this time, Fang is trusted to jump the ball. And even though he was underestimated before the game started, he managed to win the jump ball. The ball was aimed at Ting, who then passed it to Xiyu. The first university team got the first 2 points because of Xiyu's dunk, and the opposing players who had underestimated Fang could only stare in amazement. Ultimately, the first university team won by a landslide because of Fang and the others' beautiful play. Since that match, Fang's prowess and slam dunk ability has attracted media attention. The latest news about him was always in the local newspapers. But one night, Fang and his team were partying at a nightclub. Fang was approached by a man who claimed to be his rival in the final match the day after tomorrow. The man then advised Fang to leave First University and join his basketball team. But getting no meaningful response from Fang, the man handed him his business card and left. Not long after, Lily tells Fang that the mysterious man is Li Tian, a former First University player who left after arguing with Ting. Li Tian is a player who would do anything to destroy Ting, including inciting Ting's members to switch teams. In the last final season, he managed to damage Ting's mental state, who was suffering from a nervous breakdown at that time. And now Li Tian was trying to get Fang to his team, causing Lily to worry that Uncle Jen might sell Fang to Li Tian's team. But Lily's worries don't come true because Jen refuses Li Tian's offer, leaving him poorly beaten on the second floor of the nightclub. The man who came with Li Tian was a bald man with glasses, the same person who had come with Ahui to the Kung Fu school and had Fang expelled. Seeing Jen's nose hurt, Fang was furious and intended to beat Li Tian and his team. But unexpectedly, Jen prevented him because he didn't want Fang to fall into their cunning trap. After all, Jen didn't want to sell the dreams and ambitions he had placed on Fang. Because of that basis, Jen instead asked Fang to give his best so that Jen didn't regret his decision to keep him on his current team. The night of the match finally came. Shortly before the game started, Li Tian came to face his former captain, Ting, while signaling that he would beat Ting in that match, and Li Tian knows very well how to do it. As soon as the match started, Li Tian's team played roughly. They don't hesitate to kick, push, and mock their opponents. At some point in the game, Fang gets a chance to retaliate against Li Tian, so he trips his leg to the ground. But his actions make Li Tian and his friends angry, to the point that their game got so rough that it hurt Ting, and he had to be replaced by another player. The final match was like hell for the First University team. They were far behind, making the players even more desperate. But then, an unexpected event occurred. The stadium experienced a sudden power outage, forcing the match to be postponed. And not long after, the bald man with glasses approached Jen to reiterate his offer to get Fang. But Jen stood firm. He refused to hand Fang over to them. The next day, Fang told Jen that he felt his parents had come to see him compete last night. During the conversation, suddenly, Ahui came with his team, confessing that the previous night he was the one who turned off the electricity in the stadium as revenge for the bald man with glasses who had betrayed him. So, Ahui's arrival this time was not to get into trouble with Fang but rather to bet $5 million on Fang's team to beat Li Tian's team. After that, Jen surprised Fang by bringing the teachers from his kung fu school. During this time, they had always watched Fang's performance on TV and were very proud of the moment. But on the other hand, their school is in dire condition, as it has now been taken over by Bi Tianhao, the bald with glasses man who is after Fang. In other places, at the same time, Ting is still feeling traumatized by the past events during his match with Li Tian, while Xiulan visits the grave of his late girlfriend and reminisces about the happy moments the two of them had together. He still loves her, and that's why he rejects Lily when she confesses her feelings to him that night on the basketball court. The refusal made Lily sad to tear up. At that moment, Fang saw her. He asked Lily to stop crying before finally trying to express his heart to her. But Fang wasn't good at expressing his feelings, making Lily chuckle at him. At least after practice, Lily sent Fang an encouraging message, causing him to smile with joy. The final, which had been postponed, finally started. But unfortunately, First University had to be willing to lose Tingwei and Xiulan, who couldn't play due to injuries. The only mainstay player left was Fang. Seeing that, Bi Tianhao and Li Tian laughed as they believed the match would go smoothly for their team. However, Fang's 4 teachers suddenly came to play for the First University team in the final match, bringing terrible terror to all Li Tian's team members. The match began, and the Kung Fu teachers showed their moves, making the opposing team completely helpless. His team was about to lose, so Bi Tianhao ordered his subordinates to fight the 4 Kung Fu masters. As a result, the basketball court suddenly became a Kung Fu battle arena. The actions of Fang's 4 teachers in the field became the media's spotlight and received applause from the audience. After that, in the changing room at halftime, the 4 teachers handed Fang a letter of Jen's deposit. According to Jen, it was a letter written by both of Fang's parents. Tears rolled down Fang's cheeks after reading the letters from the parents he never knew. But Fang still has a game left to play. Fortunately, Xiulan and Tingwei were able to return to play after their injuries were healed by the 4 teachers. Ting and his team managed to display a slick game and narrow the difference in the score. But during the break, Ting's body suddenly trembled. He was traumatized again and had to hand Fang the final pitch. Then, just as they were about to enter the field, a man in a suit suddenly appeared, hitting Fang on the leg with a baseball bat. Fang felt pain as the man was quickly taken into custody by the guard on duty. Li Tian's team's cheating didn't end there. When Fang threw the ball almost into the ring, suddenly, the referee punched the ball off the field, shocking the players and spectators. On the other hand, Bi Tianhao cheered for his team's victory, saying that the foul ball entry rule only applies to players, not referees. The referee who committed the offense was then disqualified, but the match's score was fixed. The winner was Li Tian's team. The First University team could only be astonished, disappointed, and wept to accept defeat. But hope wasn't wholly dashed because then Fang remembered his teacher's teachings about the technique of changing the universe. Instantly, Fang took out the magic move and returned the time to the past, precisely in the last seconds of the match when he threw the ball into the ring. On this second occasion, Fang deliberately missed his throw so that the ball could be caught by Ting, who would then put the ball into the ring. Fang's plan worked. Ting took Fang's pass and dunked straight into the ring, making First University victorious. But when the players rejoiced, Fang was a little disappointed because he finally realized that the 2 parents who watched him compete were Xiulan's father and mother. After the final match, Fang became famous and had many fans. While chatting with Jen at the park, Fang was approached by a group of girls asking for his autograph. At that moment, Jen admitted that the letter written by Fang's parents was only his composition. But not long after, they were visited by a mysterious woman who brought a luxury car. The woman then asked them to come with her. In the car, the woman said she was sent by Fang's parents to deliver a message. A surprising fact is revealed. Fang's biological father is Wang Yiwan, the wealthiest person in Asia. The information then made Jen nervous. So, he immediately took Fang to a store and bought him an expensive suit to wear to meet with his father tomorrow. The next day, Jen accompanied Fang to meet Wang Yiwan. Wang then checked Fang's necklace, which he had gotten since he was a baby. The necklace was proof that Fang was indeed the child he had abandoned in the past. Fang then asked why Wang threw him away, to which Wang admitted that he was bankrupt at the time and was being chased by moneylenders. The situation made Wang worry for Fang's safety, and so he was forced to leave him with a letter near the basketball court. Hearing his father's confession, Fang burst into tears. Wang then asked him to come closer, saying he would take him to London to inherit his business. When Fang was led to his father's room, he stopped in his tracks and turned to Jen tearfully as he tried hard to let Fang go. The film closed by showing Jen having dinner with his daughter in the back of a French restaurant, but he was so sad and lonely after losing his best friend. His daughter was aware of Jen's sadness, but she couldn't do anything about it. But suddenly, Jen was startled when someone threw a coin into his wine glass. It turned out to be Fang, who ended up not going to London with his father because he didn't want to part with Jen. Fang realized that Jen had been using him as a tool for profit, but he felt appreciated because Jen had entrusted his hopes to him. Jen admitted that he was just a loser, who met a little devil who fortunately managed to change his life. And the film ends while they both laugh together while crying with emotion. The moral that can be learned from this movie is, if you join a basketball team, make friends with some kung fu masters. So, when you have trouble facing a tough team, you can ask the masters to help you and come to play together. Nobody cares if the rules don't allow outsiders to join the game.